Hey everybody, it's Tim hitting the beast of the marching arts, and I am so excited. I get to talk to one of my favorite people on the planet. Jackie Gilley is here. Jackie, how are you?
I'm wonderful. How are you, Tim?
I'm great. I had this idea to do some conversations about three things I wish I'd known when I started teaching. And I have to tell you, Jackie, you were the first person I thought of because I think you're such a wonderful educator. You've had a really successful career. You've been an adjudicator, a teacher. Well, tell everybody, what are all the different things? What are all the roles that you've had in your life?
Um, I was a band director for 30 years, but my first year of teaching, I taught art because my original degree was art, and then band, and I did yearbook, and I was a freshman class sponsor because that's what you do in a little school. But then eventually I got to do just band and color guard, and I'm allowed to adjudicate. Last year I got to be adjunct faculty for Oklahoma State University, supervising student teachers. So this topic is very near and dear to me because I know everything that they forget to teach you or don't have time to teach you in school.
No, absolutely. And that's the whole point for this is there's no way they can teach you everything. And I think everybody has a list of, man, if I just known a couple things, would it make my life so much easier? So let's help those young teachers know these things up front. So Jackie, I'm so glad that you're talking to me. So what's the first thing that comes to your mind when you're like, what I wish I had known?
No one talks to you about how important relationships are. They might tell you that the most important people are the school secretary and the custodian, and that is true. You need them
Yes,
on your team, they and the school counselor.
yes.
But what people don't talk to you about is your relationship with the students and with the rest of the faculty. But to me, the relationship with the students is the most important thing. When I had a student teacher, I took pictures of the class. I wrote their names in Sharpie next to the photos. And I told the student teachers that they had to have every kid's name memorized by the end of the first week. So when the kids walked into the classroom, you could call them out by name and say hello to them, ask them how they're doing. Same thing when they brought in their instruments before school or came in to get their instruments after school. You could talk to them, build their trust, show them that you really did care. Because a lot of those kids go through a whole semester and the teacher doesn't even know their name because they just come in for an hour and they leave. But band's a total different animal. It really is about the relationship because a lot of us get to have those kids for 3 years, 4 years, 7 years if you're lucky.
Yeah.
And you need to know all about them, their family situation, their financial situation, where they're struggling, if they have any kind of special needs or learning issues. But just to care about them as a human being because the hardest years now we know are preteen and teenage years. Things are happening to their body, to their brain,
Oh, yes.
and they don't understand what's going on. But it's so nice when they can just walk in, sit down, and just relax and go, oh, I'm in a safe space. And that's because you have a relationship with those kids.
That's so important. It's funny you say that, Jackie. It made me think. I tell people all the time how important my high school band director was to me because I always say he was the first person that like really saw me and I felt completely accepted and seen by this person. And I've had a podcast with Mr. Coles, and you can find that at the Marching Roundtable, everybody, if you want to hear me talk to my old high school band director about that, because I wanted to thank him for doing that. Like, that was profoundly important in my life that, like, I felt completely safe and trusted and seen and liked. And it was okay for me to be that sort of crazy band nerd kid that I was. Um, that was really important in my life. So that's exactly what you're describing.
Well, no one tells you that. When you're young, you're a first year band director or whatever, it's your ego. It's about you. And you've got to realize that you are nothing without those kids. They're your life. And when I say my kids, I'm talking about my band kids because I don't have any kids of my own.
Yeah, and they are. I mean, they are. That's really why you're teaching. Like we can get hung up on the trophies and the scores and the what music we're teaching, whatever. But really, we're teaching kids to be great people, great citizens, go out there, have a great life. We all know that. It also reminds me when I talked to Trey Harris at Bassett High School in Virginia. So just like he's in the middle of nowhere, and he has built this incredibly nationally recognized program. And that's exactly what he described. He said, he can say, "Oh, how's your grandmother doing today?" Like
Yeah.
he knows those kids, and the community knows that he cares, that he's there, he's part of the community. That kind of stuff is so important.
Well, to me, it makes all the difference in the world because they come back to see you. They want to talk to you. Facebook has been such a wonderful thing because you can reconnect with those people that you consider your extended family. But, at the end of the day, they don't remember their ratings. They don't remember the trophies. They might remember the really big ones or whatever, but it's more about them and asking about so and so and this and that and the other, and just these great memories that they have of band. So you realize that's the most important thing. Put the ego aside.
Yeah, and just to mention something else you said, it's all relationships. I think every single year that I'm involved in this activity in any way, I realize it's the relationships, the collaborations, the way that people interact, the way I interact with people is so critical to my enjoyment and the success of what I'm trying to do. So relationships are everything. All right, Jackie, I love that you started with that. What's another one?
No one ever talks to you about discipline. When I came in, I started teaching in the late 70s, and there were not very many female band directors. And kids tested me all the time. And I hate to say this, but most of the male band directors were sitting there just waiting for me to fail, sitting back and watching. So you had to figure out a way to control those students, to control the unruly class, to figure out what to do with those kids who needed attention, even if they got it in a negative way. No one tells you how to control a classroom. You have to develop your own rules and system and develop a respect for them, and they have a respect for you, which helps. But to me, it's like no one warned you about full moons. No one warned you about weather changes. It's like preteens and kindergarten kids are the best predictor of when there's going to be a change in the barometric pressure and weather. And it doesn't take long for those other teachers to figure out, yeah, it's a real thing, because no one says how do you keep the kids engaged the week before Christmas or the week before spring break or the last week of school. How do you still make it something besides a madhouse? Because so many teachers just have a party every day or just throw three sheets to the wind and say, I just can't do it. So that's the other thing. It's like, how do you develop a system, not of rules, because it's really more about this is our atmosphere, this is our culture, this is how we behave, and that they control each other so you don't have to control them because there's just those high expectations there.
Yeah, used the word culture. I feel like that's the whole thing. People always want to know how to build that sort of culture of success. And you're right, when you get that culture built, it takes care of itself. The students are monitoring each other because they realize this is important. We need to have a productive rehearsal. It's not like you're fighting them. And, back in the day, Jackie, band directors were famous for this sort of iron hand and like, screaming and yelling, and everybody was sort of controlled by intimidation and fear. And I have to tell you, when I was in band and I was ever under one of those people, that did not work for me. Like I would sit there quietly, but there's no way I couldn't wait to leave. And I was not performing my best because I was terrorized, right? So I'm glad
Well,
that we've gotten away from that sort of old school band director, let's control them out of fear. But then you have to figure out, how am I going to engage them? How am I going to keep them attentive and keep that culture of success growing?
true. And it's not easy. And there's no one that can give you the answer because every community, every school is different. They can give you suggestions, they can tell you what works for them, but you have to figure out your community, your students, and what they care about. Like, and every class is different. That's what's amazing is you will have these stellar classes that come through. I'd have like one class every 10 years that was just phenomenal. The kids that you'll never forget just because they were so wonderful together. And then you'll have one class that comes through and teachers will warn you from kindergarten. This is like the little terrors or whatever. And you have to realize what's important to them because for some of them, you'd have classes that it was more important for them to have social time at the end of class. So if they were good during class, I'd give them that minute or two extra at the end of class. And if they weren't, then they had to, play until like a minute before the bell or whatever. I had some classes that they wanted to go eat early or they'd do anything for Hershey Kiss or a Jolly Rancher. It's just different for every class. So you just figure out what's their trigger and what will make them want to be better or want to try harder. But I was one of those people with the iron fist when it first started out because that's all I knew. And it didn't work for me. And I feel so badly about those kids that had me in the first, 3 years of teaching, because that's how I tried to teach, because that's all you knew.
Yeah, we all
But
say that. Like that,
yeah,
those first years, and we didn't know what we were doing. I mean, I think, I always say, Jackie, though, that students respond to the fact if you're really trying. I feel like that to me is the key. Is like if they know that you care about them, which you've already talked about in the first thing, building those relationships. They know that you care. They know that you're there to do your best work, and you really want them to learn how to play better. And let's make this concert great or whatever. They will rally around that. They can tell if you really care. And that's
true,
part of what you're saying. That's part of that discipline to me is if they know that you're there and you're trying hard for them, then they will follow you.
true. And for me, I didn't stay on the podium. And I keep telling the student teachers the podium is not a throne. You've got to get out there in the middle of them, especially with middle school kids. We had our chairs set so far apart so I could literally go in and out, be around them, play next to them, make suggestions or whatever, so they wouldn't be intimidated, but there was room for me to get around and try to go and give a little attention to each kid, even if it's just a nod,
Yeah.
or a reminder of a fingering or whatever. And I
Yeah.
think that made a big difference too. You've got to get off that podium. Same thing for marching band. You can't stay up there in the box.
That's
You
right.
got to get down there in the trenches and be with the kids, whether it's just in warm-ups, stretches during the morning, stretching with them. That's what I do with the school where I assist now. I just basically harass them every morning because it's 6:45 and they're all teenagers and they're still, in sleep mode and everything. And you just walk among them and harass them a little bit and have a good time.
Yeah, and the other thing you're describing too, Jackie, is that you're being you. You're bringing your personality to it and letting them see who you really are. And I feel like that's also part of the discipline. You have to figure out what works for my personality. You talked about each individual group of kids, and I love that because they are really different every single class, every single year. But I also think that you have to figure out what works for my personality.
True. Because some kids, they respond differently. And some
Yeah.
kids are in there because their parents made them. So they're going to be there with a grudge and you just have to gently win them over.
Yeah, it's work, but it's worth it. Okay, I'm loving what you're bringing to the table, Jackie. I knew I would love this conversation. All right, so do you have a third one in mind?
For me, no one ever talks to you about finances. They'll talk to you about band budgets and they give you these unrealistic expectations, but that's not the way it is any longer. Maybe in some of your great school districts or in Texas, Indiana, some places like that, maybe it's different. But here in Oklahoma, essentially there's not much of a budget in most school districts as what you can go and fundraise, what your parents and band boosters can deal with. They don't tell you about counting money and writing receipts and being fiscally responsible. They don't tell you how to go and deal with the financial secretary. You go in and they give you like a 1 hour briefing on how to do requisitions, vendor list, tax exempt status, whatever, reimbursements. It's like, how do you deal with all of that? It's overwhelming. And there's been so much financial mismanagement because no one covers any of this. And I know several band directors who've been asked to leave and they were given a good recommendation, but it was because they couldn't handle money or it never quite added up, that kind of thing. And to me, it's like there needs to be a better way to help everyone understand how this works. What are the boosters responsible for? What money are you getting from the district? What money do you get from the school or the principal? What money do you get from the boosters? What money do we have to fundraise? Are we going to charge fees? If so, how much? How do you figure all this out? No one explains any of that. And that's why when everyone graduates, they want to be an assistant band director because they don't know any of this.
Yeah, that might be one of the best reasons to be an assistant at first. Because yeah, I mean, I remember, Jackie, when I started teaching and all of a sudden it's like I'm collecting money for whatever, and I didn't know how to do that,
No.
and I actually have been recently was talking to a very young band director who had a contentious problem with her school money secretary person, like their school
Oh,
treasurer or whatever. Like they would like were out to. She felt like they were out to get her. And I'm like, okay, so there's it goes back to those building relationships again. But you know, you have to do this right, or you can get in a lot of trouble.
And it's scary to realize how much money goes through your hands. Yeah,
Yeah.
and my thing was, yes, we sold the world's finest chocolate bars because those were really popular, so we'd sell them for 1 week in the spring just because it was so easy and the kids had no problem selling them. But that's before we had all these nutrition guidelines and things too. But I got so tired of the kid that would walk in with pennies and nickels and dimes, and I was going to waste my whole planning period counting money. So finally, I made a deal with them, and I just said, "You bring in a check for," because I'd give them, 25 candy bars. You bring in a check, or you bring in cash, like a $20 bill and four ones, and you get to keep one candy bar for free. It was worth it for me to pay for that $1 candy bar out of that box, just not to have to count coins.
Yeah.
And the kids just thought it was wonderful. So they'd be out there wheeling and dealing with people, giving them coins and asking for $1 bills before they'd bring in their money envelope to me because coins are so filthy. And no one tells you that. And it's like, I'd be done and my hands would be black. And it's just like, and I've wasted a whole planning period and got
Yeah.
nothing done because you can't leave for the day and have this money not turned in.
Yeah.
And basically, the secretary wanted it in before noon. She'd go to the bank and then go to Sonic. So it's like, what do you do? How do you do it? Do you have your band booster treasurer? Are they able to come in and help you count money? You've
So
got to figure out a way to make it all happen.
so what is the answer if somebody gets that job and they don't know this financial stuff? What is the answer for them? How do they figure it
You
out?
you have to find a mentor that can come and help you with it.
Yeah.
Someone's got
Yeah.
to help you explain it, or you've got to have, a fine arts director or a supervisor or someone that's there to help you figure all this out because it's just too overwhelming.
Yeah, and to that point, I would say don't be afraid to ask for help. I think you remember, Jackie, I remember when I was started teaching, I was afraid everybody was going to figure out all the stuff I didn't know. I
Yeah.
mean, that was my big terror of my first for early years of teaching was my students are going to realize. Of course, I came to later to realize that they didn't care. They liked all the stuff I did know, and they liked me. So I was fine, but I wish I had known that early on. So anyway, don't be afraid to go to the school treasurer or your supervisor and say, I'm not sure how to do this money stuff, and I don't want to mess this up, and
Yeah.
ask for that help. I think that's key that you said that.
Well, to me, it was so overwhelming,
Yeah.
and it's such a waste of time, but there's no easy answer. Yeah, but you've got to find creative ways to fundraise because not everyone's going to be able to sell the candy bars, or their parents don't want them to. Because I had parents that just said, "Tell me what the fees are, and I'm just going to write the check. We're not fundraising." Like,
Sure.
okay, great, thank you. I'd be
Yeah.
thrilled.
Yeah, there are some communities where that can happen real well, and that's really easy. But then there's always students who aren't in that position, and you need to make sure and figure out how to help them out. So that goes back to your original thing of making sure you know the students and you're aware and you're there for them.
Because I was really blessed that our junior service league, I wrote a grant because I had some kids that fiscally could not do it. I mean, they were, free lunch, free breakfast. They
Yeah.
didn't have the money or the capability, living with a grandparent or a parent in prison, whatever, certain situations.
Yeah.
We had a work study program, and they literally could come to the band room and help me for an hour and get $5 credit for their band fees.
Cool.
Well, it was really wonderful because it's amazing. Some kids that love to, run the vacuum cleaner or love to, staple and punch holes and or run
Yeah.
off music. It was
Yeah.
amazing to me the kids that needed the help or needed the attention.
Yeah, and that's actually time and a place they like to be. Sometimes that's maybe the best part of their day. So you just never know what you're giving to a student. But your point is make that available, make options available to help students in lots of ways.
Well, it was a great answer for my situation. And I was really
Love it.
blessed that there were resources that could help us make that happen.
I love your three suggestions. Okay, because this is all really good stuff and very important. And I love that you're still Jackie, like you're doing mentoring those student teachers and stuff. Like I love that you're still doing that because you are such a kind, patient person, and you're the kind of person I would want helping me when I'm trying to learn what I'm doing. You know what I mean? So I love that you're still doing that.
Well, thanks. You're very kind. I feel really blessed that I'm able to do it.
Well, and of course, you do the same thing when you're adjudicating and you're making those wonderful comments and helping people out, and you're doing it in a kind, helpful way. I just love the tone that you bring to the world, and I knew that I wanted to share that again on this conversation.
Well, thank you. You're very kind. And it's a blessing to know you as well because you've done so much for so many in so many different areas.
Well, just
You're
trying
just not
to.
about, well, you're not just about marching band or just about color guard or whatever. You just carry all the different aspects and realms of what it's like truly to be in music education.
Well, thank you. I certainly hope so. Trying to be here to be one of the helpers. I'm always saying, look to the helpers. That encourages me. Rather than looking at the things that are frustrating or seem so terrible, is look to the people that are out there helping and doing good work. And Jackie, you're one of those. So thanks for talking to me. And I'm just really happy to get to share this.
Well, thanks. I really appreciate you asking me. It was truly an honor.
Marching Arts Education is the home of the Marching Roundtable podcast. We give you access to the top marching arts professionals through live webinars, podcasts, videos, interviews, and online coursework. With over 1,000 podcasts and hundreds of webinars and videos, there are hours of great professional development for you and your staff. Sign up for a membership to Marching Arts Education to get complete access to all webinars, videos, and podcasts, plus discounts on coursework. Many directors are using professional development funds through their school or boosters to make these resources available to their staff. Imagine what you could do with so many great new ideas from the top professionals in our activity. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and sign up for our newsletter to find out about the latest podcasts, webinars, and new content. Find all of this and sign up at marchingartseducation.com.